Hello, and welcome to Funding with Trust, the podcast for people looking to make more impact in international development. Hi, I'm Eve Omala. In August, I attended the Philanthropy Australia conference in Adelaide, Australia, and had the chance to speak to Isabel Kamariza, the founder of Solid Africa, who had traveled all the way from Rwanda to attend this conference. Solid Africa provides nutritious meals to Rwanda's most vulnerable patients. Isabel has come a long way convincing funders to fund her work. In this podcast, she talks about how she almost gave up chasing grant funding out of a frustration of being rejected by several funders. She also talks about what inspired her to keep going, effective localization, and the qualities exhibited by trust-based funders. Let's jump right in. Isabel, welcome to Funding with Trust.
Hello, Eve. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure.
You've come all the way from Rwanda to attend Philanthropy Australia, which is where we are recording from. I hope you're enjoying Australia so far.
Yes, it's my first time here, so I'm really excited. New continent, new adventures.
Perfect. And Isabel, it's such a privilege and an honor to have you today. I've been following your work for a while, and what you've achieved with Solid Africa is simply outstanding. So today we want to hear from your story. We want to hear from how you've been able to work with your funders, from when you got your first check to where you are now, it's been a long journey for you, but I must say there is so much success from your work and with what you've achieved today. So where did this all start? I know a little bit about you dropped out of law school to start Solid Africa, but let's hear, how did you drop out of school to run your own organization?
Yeah, I was studying law in Belgium, and to tell you the truth, I never really liked law, so I wanted to drop out even from the first year. But I continued to study, I think, a little bit for my parents, a little bit because, I needed to study. But along the way, I think I went to what I would call an existential crisis. The idea was I wasn't sure what life would be about, if it was to have a good job, marry, have children. But I felt there must be something more. So while I was in that quest, I started actually reading the Bible, because I was a big, good Christian before. But my mom used to say that if you had any problem, you could find a solution in the Bible. So I actually took 3 months, read the Bible from beginning to the end. And there's a lot of things I didn't understand. But one of the things I did understand, actually there's two things I understood. That first of all, it's when you are young that you do things. And it was against all the things I used to think, because I used to think that I would need to, to have a job, get rich. When I'm rich, then I can help people. That was what I thought.
Yeah.
And then I was reading something that was so contrary about what I thought should be my life about, which is, okay, I want to have an impact, but I will need money to do so. The other thing was, at the end of the day, what would be requested is, how many people have you impacted? And I was 21, and I really didn't have any impact on anybody. I would say learning. I started seeing all the issues. I was living in Brussels, in the community I was living in. And one of the things was homelessness. And I would see homeless people. And one of the guys that I saw one day, I realized that 3 or 4 years he was in the street, in the metro station, and that every day I would pass by him when I would go to work. But never did I say hi. He wasn't even a person. So I felt a lot of shame. So I started talking to him. So we became friends. And I would make a sandwich for him. And then I realized, it just cost me €1 to feed him. So I went to my friends, everybody that I knew, and said, if you give me €1, I can feed one person. So that's how my journey started, in realizing that we don't need to have grand gesture to actually drive change. You don't need to have millions to drive change. You just need to start somewhere with one person.
That's really powerful. Just start somewhere, find a place. And I like what you said, that, your dream was, I'll get rich, and then I'll start doing this work. But it doesn't work. Just start somewhere with what you have. That's really great. And so when do you move back to Rwanda to start doing this work?
I think from that point, the story is that I dropped out of school without telling anybody, neither my parents, neither my sisters. And then I had to tell them, especially that I was so into reading the Bible, connecting with God. So when I told them, I remember my dad came to see me, and then I was telling him, this is what I do. I have a whole project with homeless people. And then he said, I think it's time for you to come home. But part of him was thinking that when I would come home, I would go back to university and finish my credit and have, have a diploma, because that's how he was educated, is that in his thinking it was, if you are successful in life, you have to have a diploma to show that you are able to. And for me, I didn't want to go to school to study something just to study. Instead, I met an amazing woman who brought me to the public hospitals in Rwanda, one of the biggest one. And with the issue was, food is not part of the hospital's care. So in Rwanda, we are one of the few countries with universal health care. More than 90% of the population have a public insurance, but food remains one of the big gaps that is existing in the whole system. And it has been like that for as long as Rwanda has existed. And it's a status quo in other African countries, not just a Rwandan issue. So the first time we went to the hospital, I went with a friend of mine, and we realized, people, if you are living away from your family, you don't have somebody to come and bring you food. If you are already struggling to have food at home, but also there were inside and outside restaurants around the hospital. But a meal would cost between 80 cents back then to $1.5. For somebody who's earning less than $2 a day, it just doesn't make math. So, and the other issue was actually that even sometimes the family who were able to bring food, they won't bring food that was appropriate to the illness of the people. So that's how we started. We started in 2010 by feeding 5 people. And this amazing woman I met who brought me to the hospital, I realized that she was feeding one person by herself since 2007. And she was a mom, she had 8 kids. She wasn't rich, she didn't have a lot of means, but she had the heart. So for me, I was then 24, and I was thinking, like, if she can do it with all the responsibility, what is my excuse? So I brought in, I think, all the friends that I knew from high school, friends of friends, and we started feeding 5 people and did that commitment. Every day we'll have 5 people that we'll choose with the help of the hospital and bring them a meal. So that's how we started Solid Africa.
And who was funding you in those initial stages?
So we were auto-funding ourselves. So meaning people would go in their fridge. Most of us were still living in our parent, or some of us were having their first job. People would give 10% of their salary. Some people would give 50%. We are just a bunch of young people. We started the movement, and we called it a movement because for us it wasn't about an organization and structure. It was more about the idea that young people that are educated can come together and find solution to the issues that we are seeing and not waiting for somebody to come and solve them. That was one of the first premises. But the second premises was, we are part of this country. We don't need to wait for the government to do everything. Rwanda is an amazing country, and I'm really objective and not objective, but mostly we have a great leadership. So which means there's so many things that are working. And for us as young people is, how can we contribute? How can we be of use in the things that we are seeing we can solve? So really that's how we started. It's like we were auto-funded by ourselves. And then moving forward, I think from the first year we did, by the end of that year, we did 80 people. We were feeding 80 people. And then we opened Solid Africa in 2011 officially. And what we did is that we went to knock on the richest people in our community and explain our idea. We put them in a room, and then people were pledging. So we moved from 80 people that we were feeding to 160, feeding them on a daily basis with that commitment. From that point, we were just having ideas, and we'll do some things like crushing events. So meaning if you have an event, we'll say, we just want to put a table, and then we'll ask for a contribution. And mostly we'll ask really for a small contribution that is voluntary, 30 cents, 50 cents. We'll go in front of restaurants. And what is funny is that the less money you'll be asking, the more people will be giving you. And then we organize on Sunday. We used to call them Solid Sundays. For all the people that have contributed, they will come to the hospital. They will see what we were doing and then be inclined to even give more. So it became a whole community bonding, and it was really driven by young people. The other thing that we did really was to put the spotlight on us and not on patients. One of the things was, how can we actually preserve their dignity? How can we do this work without using, I would say, their misery, or without using the most vulnerable part of their lifetime? How can we do this without, some of those children might become a minister, and they might not want to be on the internet with them like at 5, 6 years old, queuing to have a plate of a meal. So that's what we did. We create a whole movement of saying we can do things.
Oh, I love that, Isabel. It speaks volumes when you're able to mobilize the local community to come behind you. It was all local resources and input helping you take this off the ground. That's just so incredible. And How long was it until you got your first institutional funding on board?
So the first institutional funding came in 2018.
So about 7-8 years.
Yes, I would say 8
goodness.
years because we actually started in 2010. It's just that it took us a year to actually open the organization, but the work started in 2010. So I would say 8 years before we had an organization, a foundation, which is the Seagull Family Foundation, to give us our first grant. But in the journey, as you said, we worked a lot with our community in those 8 years. And the other thing that we're really excited about is that we had help from the government. So in 2012, since the beginning, we wanted to build an industrial kitchen. The government gave us the land. We wanted to farm. The government gave us the land. But we couldn't find any other help outside of Rwanda. We applied to grant. We did call for proposal. We didn't have a team. We are all volunteers. Nobody's getting paid. Actually, people are just spending their own money, spending their own resources to be able to make that happen. And the idea is that the work that Solid Africa is doing, you can just see it on the ground on a daily basis. It's nothing, it's not on the paper, it's not about reporting, it's not about reevaluating. It's really that you see faces of the people you are feeding. You see somebody getting better because of the food you are giving. So that's why people kept this for as long as it took. And then 2018, we had somebody from the Seagull Family Foundation actually contacted us, a program officer who's Burundian. We changed everything. So she came on the ground, she understood everything that we were doing. Her name is Lana. And I remember one thing that she said, but how are you doing it all by yourself? Mm. And I said, I'm not alone in the proper sense. Nobody's doing it full time. But I had a lot of help. But one of the things also, I think, as a first grant is that Seagull Family Foundation trusted us when we didn't have any systems in place. We didn't have an accountant. We were just tracking, this is how much we received, this is how much we spent. As easily as possible, there were no projection, there were no percentage on inflation, there were no audit, there were not all of that. Our budgeting was simple, didn't have really a communication, but still they trusted the work that we're doing and gave us that first grant.
That's amazing. We'll come back to Seagull Family Foundation just shortly. But before we do, I want to go back to this 7-8 year period where you were writing proposals, you were approaching foundations, and no one was giving you money. Just walk me through what was going through your mind. You know, you need the money, you're already feeding patients, you know you're doing a good job, but there's just no one out there believing in your vision. How did you navigate that?
That's where the power of determination comes from. And I think we stopped applying for grant in 2016. After 6 years, I was like, we are done.
So you almost gave up?
Yes, giving up on looking for that money externally, on having that, I would say, that proof of, you know, you are doing well, we'll fund you, that acceptance, I would call it, that acceptance from funders, from big organizations. And actually we turn into, how do we make it happen so that people want to give us money? How do we streamline everything that we are doing? And one of the things was we needed an industrial kitchen, and we couldn't find money for that. More than just the programs, we couldn't even find the money for the programs. So between 2014 to 2018, I called them the year of stagnation, because we're feeding 400 people, cooking from my parents' kitchen and another member kitchen, and we couldn't cook for more. Even if you had given us few money as a business in Rwanda and say, you know, cook for more, we couldn't. We couldn't cook for more than 400 people. So in all those years, we were really in stagnation. And also those years also gave us the fact of really understanding what we wanted to do, how we wanted to do it, and how our model can actually scale. But also the other thing is, because you hear so much no, 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 you are doubting, am I crazy? What are we doing? Is it working? And then I'll go back, for me, the one thing that I always go back, it's always go back to your first love. Mm-hmm. So every time I'll go to the hospital, every time I'll go talk to the patient, I'll go back renewed and said, you know, I'm not doing that for other things than those people. And we made a commitment. And every day, because Rwanda is really small, we always say it's a little bit of it's a little community. So it's not that the patient we are serving are far from who we are. They're really embedded in the community. They can be our cousins, they can be our aunts. So that really helped us to actually continue. The other thing is, when we saw at least that the leadership, the government was understanding what we were doing, even if they were not giving us cash money, but in kind, I think in 2017, I took my courage, I would say, and we went to present our project to the First Lady Foundation, the Imbuto Foundation, and presented that. And I think in the meeting, it was about me being tired and feeling like I can't continue because I can't arrive to this vision if I don't have a kitchen. And Imbuto Foundation actually said, it doesn't have to be a burden. We'll do everything to find that fund. So in collaboration with the King of Morocco Foundation, they actually gave us the fund to build the kitchen. In the same year that this is being finalized, that's where we met Sigor Family Foundation, and the rest is history.
And I've seen your kitchen. It is so beautiful. Man, it is something up there.
Yes.
So good job. Okay, so one thing you told me was that during that period when you're trying to apply for grants and you're hearing no responses, you'd previously told me that a few funders that actually contacted you were trying to tell you what to do with their money, and you actually said no to that. Why did you push back on that? And maybe you could talk to us about the dangers of top-down philanthropy.
I think that sometimes people think that we enter in this work without knowing what we are doing. But since the beginning, we knew exactly what we were doing and what we needed to achieve. Of course, we didn't foresee how long the journey will be.
Yeah.
We didn't foresee so many things, but one thing was sure is that we knew exactly what we wanted. And some of the funders, when we started, they were like, no, what do you want to build a big industrial kitchen? Build a small one. And after that small one, if you can prove you can manage a small one, then we can build other ones. But for us, we knew that the effort that it would take us to build a small kitchen is the same effort that would take us to build a big one, but the result would be completely different. But also we knew that it was so difficult to have money to invest in a building that even if that funder was saying that, it wasn't sure that they would give us money after that to build a bigger one. Mm-hmm. It's like, somebody who's broke and is still saying no. Some people can look at it as saying, yeah, maybe they don't know what they want. But I never had any regret of not taking some of the money because I don't think that all money is good money. I do think that funds are there to help us do something. Either you are a funder or you are a doer. At the end of the day, it goes into the impact we all want to do. And for us, it was clear that we wanted to build a big kitchen. It was clear that we wanted to shift conversation from food security to nutrition security. It was clear that for us also we wanted to scale and go in all public hospitals, but for that we needed to professionalize what we were doing because we couldn't scale from my mom's kitchen. We couldn't present a project to the government and say this is the solution. We couldn't also streamline and make the food really affordable because now we are cooking in mass cooking. We are doing around 15,000 meals a day with only 12 cooks because we had the time to think about how we design our kitchen to be super efficient.
Oh, great. And now just back to Sigo. They were the first funder that believed in you. They didn't care what you had or didn't have. They knew that they were going to fund you and they believed in the project. Why is that? Why do you think they were very different from the many you'd approached before?
I think, bluntly, it's just because they had Africans on their team. They had project managers that were African, that grew up in Africa, grew up in Burundi, in East Africa, who knew exactly the challenges I was talking about. I didn't need to write 3 paragraphs into explaining this is how my problem is and this is how it impacts. They knew exactly what I was talking about. So already because we have the same understanding, it makes it easier. When we did proposals, sometimes in few times, because not everybody gives feedback, in few times that they were giving us feedback, most of the people didn't understand even the problem because they couldn't see that food was not included because coming from their country, food is already part of the hospital stay. So some people were seeing it as this is maybe a known problem. This I never heard about it. Actually, one guy one day wrote, which was funny, wrote, no, I don't believe this is true because probably even if there's no food in the hospital, there's actually food in the restaurant.
Oh,
which I responded, yes, but at what price? Those in the restaurant. So there's a lot of things that made it that for Sigo it was so much easier because they just clearly understood because they invested in a strategy of believing that even on the side of the funder, they have to have an understanding of the issue they want to actually tackle and not having an understanding from their point of view, but actually from the point of view of the doer, because at the end of the day, they are the one doing the work. So if you are giving money, you have to make sure that the person you are giving to, you have the same understanding. So I think that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think there's so many lessons that other funders can take from the Sigo Family Foundation model. They've got a team on ground and they recognize that if they were to localize the way philanthropy is done, they've got to hire a team that has lived experience, understands the challenges, and can very quickly identify African visionaries to support. That's really great. And Isabel, your work has gone beyond Isabel trying to feed a few patients to an organization that is signing partnerships with the government of Rwanda to provide meals across all public district hospitals. What do you attribute that success to?
I will say that it's consistency. I have to say that even on the government side, the issue of nutrition is something that, like so many agendas, so many things to do, so many hospitals to build, like there were so many things to do in Rwanda that we had to actually push that and say, nutrition is as needed because food is medicine. And having processes, having a kitchen, having consistency in what you are doing, then it was easy to be able to scale with them. So it all started, I think, during COVID. We had to scale with the government. We went from 1 hospital to 4 hospitals, then to all COVID-19 treatment centers. But also we understood that food was needed in the hospital because COVID showed us that everything can shut down and you need the food in the hospitals because even the families that had the means to bring the food couldn't bring them during the lockdown during COVID. So I think the other thing from the government is that, as I said, we have a great leadership that believe in their young people and that believe that if you're bringing a solution and that solution is serving Rwandans, then we should help you to do so. And so that's why now we are actually working hand in hand to be able to scale that. But also we have been then able to attract even other ministries like the Ministry of Education, who is seeing the solution we are bringing to the hospital and say this can actually work in public hospital. We have been able to show that it doesn't cost a lot of money to provide a nutritious meal that is healthy, that is diversified. So I don't know if you know, but more than 3 billion people in the world can't afford to have a healthy meal. This is not an issue that we are just tackling for Africa. This is an issue that is elsewhere. This is an issue that we can actually find a solution that can be replicable. Because what is expensive is not the food itself, it's how we make the whole process happen. But it's also how we view how a certain portion of the population should eat. When we talk about big institutions investing in African countries, for example, I would talk maybe for Africa, for the few countries that I know, is that you find that we have the same meal again and again and again, that we find in refugee camps, that we find in schools, that we find in all of that, where there's aid money, there's that premises of having the same kind of food that doesn't vary.
Ugali and beans.
Ugali and beans. And then you have one greens. Depending on the country is different, but in our country it's like dodo. It's like, in English they call it amaranth, again and again. So that's what also we are changing. We have a 14-day rotation menu where the kids are exciting of eating, where the grown-ups are exciting of eating. But more than that, we provide what we call medically tailored meals, because it's not about just giving you food, it's giving you food that heals you. It's giving you food that make you healthy.
And what about the caretakers? So the patient is feeding, but if I'm the mother taking care of my child and I also don't have access to food, how do I watch my child eating this delicious food from Solid Africa and I'm starving?
Yes, we also do feed the caregiver because, when it's a mom and a child, it's even easier. But what we have noticed at the beginning when we started the work, if it's 2 adults, the patient would eat less to make sure that his caretaker is eating, because at the end of the day, that caretaker has stopped to do whatever they were doing to come take care of you. So there's also that aspect of guilt. So, and already you are sick, already you don't have a lot of appetite. So you will find that we feed both of them. What we do is that we have different quality of meals in terms of not like of the patient having that medically tailored meals, and then the caregiver have a general diet. But also we understood that food can actually do so much more. Like we have one of my favorites. I'm a mother. We have a breastfeeding diet. We have noticed that even by eating 3 times a day, some women are struggling to produce enough milk. So what we do is that we give beverages in between meals, and if it's magic, because in 2 to 3 days, you see a woman that was struggling now having a lot of breast milk. So those are the things that we do on a daily basis, and that's what make our work so satisfying and fulfilling.
I love it. And now, help me paint a picture of what your ideal funder looks like. How do they engage with you, or how would you like them to engage with you? What's their approach to funding? How do they monitor your work? Just if you had that superstar funder, what would you like to see from them?
I would say that my super funder is somebody when I'm in trouble, I'm thinking about them and then reach out. And know that, first of all, there will be no judgment of saying, what happened? And understanding that life is not a straight line. Understanding that even with unrestricted funding, it doesn't mean that there won't be any bumps. And those are the funders, and I will give an example of one of them. When we were building the kitchen, and we had that land we had from the government, the master plan of the city changed. So the land became smaller. So we had now to build in stories instead of building a flat, which was more expensive. But then the funder for the building had already given us the money. So now we can go back and ask for more money because also they had a budget. And then I thought about two funders. And I said, they can help me. So I called and explained, I will need from each one of them, I needed 90,000 more than whatever they had committed, because I need that 180,000 more to be able to finish all of that. And I'm saying that is not even linked to the money. It's just linked to the fact that we are able to having that conversation. And then understanding that the super funder is somebody that understands that, in life things happen. And also, some of my funders, even when I come to them, my super funders, even when they can't commit to give me money, they will always give me advice and say, now we can help you with that, but have you thought about this thing? Have you thought about this? Can you manage it that way? Do you think if you do this and maybe this program you put it next year, can you still be able to achieve that? So I think for me, it's a super funder. The super funder is somebody that you trust, that they trust you, and that you are open to actually be vulnerable in your mistakes, and not be judged for it.
I've taken that on note. I hope we can be a super funder to most of our grantee partners, if not all of them.
Yes.
Okay, so, and it's not, your work, it's not always been rosy. You've had ups and downs, you've had challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges you've had to work through?
I think the first one is human resources. So as an organization, we relied on volunteers for almost 10 years. I think our first paid staff were in 2020. So 10 years after that, we were just all volunteers.
So you were working for free for all these years?
Yes, me actually worked for free up until 2022. Because even with the first staff, the need was so much. And I have to say, I'm privileged from my family, from my husband. I wasn't lacking anything, but I was truly committed to do this work. So I think the first challenge was always human resources, on not doing a lot of things. So now we've grown from that small team in 2020 where we were around 20. Now we have a team of around 213 people. And it's not to say that it's a rapid growth, because some people will say it and saying, oh my God, this is such a rapid growth in 4 years. And I always bring it back. No, it's not a rapid growth. It's that we wanted to grow so much like in the past, but when the stagnation, we didn't have the means. So what we are doing?
You didn't have money?
No, we didn't have money. So it's like I stayed on the same place for a lot of years. So now I'm running, but I'm not running because I'm running from something. I'm running toward a goal that I know clearly we can achieve. So, and I think the other thing, of course, is funding. It's all the things that we were talking about, how do you build trust in yourself when you feel that people outside are not building that trust? How do you feel when you start to go in those spaces? And that's why I love the fact of saying localization. And I want maybe to point on something, because sometimes now localization look like just hiring local people, make it local. It doesn't. Localization is really about a local person being the funder or being the one taking the decision. Because as long as you are hired and then you still have your board that is in the US, your board that is in the wing, or having people calling the shots, then it's not localization for me. So the other thing was, how do we make sure that people like me, people know their community, people who are struggling to be able to make this work happen, have all the help that they have? I think at the end of the day, you can be proud of being the only one succeeding. The success comes from seeing other people like you being in those spaces. And it took us a lot of time for us to be on those spaces and to know the table. Before having our first grant from Cigar Family Foundation, most of the foundations that are funding us now, I didn't even know about them. There were no avenue for me to know about them because most of the foundations now, it's not a public call for proposal. And then also for the public call of proposal, what I have understood is that sometimes they are looking for something that they already know, already have checked on a way how it works. So when you're a new person bringing a new idea that sometimes people don't actually understand, I think when you talk about the challenges, my challenge also has been to be able to communicate. To communicate what we are doing, communicate that is needed, and communicating that is essential. Yeah. So I feel like I spent a lot of years trying to explain and trying to come back and be like, okay, how do I say it in a better way? How do I say it in another way? How do I say it in a way that people understand? So a lot of going back into the messaging of the same thing that you do because you keep having people not understanding. But also sometimes it's just a difference of perceptions. People don't understand because they don't even know what you are talking about. How is food missing in hospitals? But this is a reality for many countries. Yeah, so I think those are the few challenges.
I like what you said. That's powerful. So we're coming to the end of this. And lastly, what should we expect to see from Solid Africa in the next 2 to 3 years?
I think, first of all, is to see us in more hospitals. In Rwanda, we have a plan by 2030 to be in all 47 district hospitals. Now we are in around 7, and we are building 3 kitchens this year. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really to see our model going into other institutions. I was talking about schools. We have done a pilot with 1,600 students. This September, we are doing 8,000 students. And then we are on a journey with the Ministry of Education to actually build a bigger kitchen that can do 100,000. The other thing that we do is that what makes our meals affordable is that we control the value chain. So we have what we call a farm to fork. We are farming most of the produce ourselves and also starting to work with cooperatives this year with 4,500 farmers to be able to really streamline what you are giving and making sure also that our meals are nutritious. Testing the soil, because we always say, I can give you 2 tomatoes, it doesn't mean that they all have the same nutrient. So our aim really is to go back into just the belief that we have to serve food as food, not to try to put things to make it. It's that we have to go to the origin of food. If we treat the soil well, if we do all of that stuff, we can actually have all the nutrients we need.
Do you have plans to go into another country? Uganda needs you.
Yes, if you have partners. I think now we are focused on Rwanda, but we are always open to work because we do believe that our solution can work everywhere. And at the same time, I have to say that we are really into advocating for food is medicine, advocating for it to become a norm, not only, I won't say even in the Western countries, because few only have that as a belief. So to make it global. To make it global and have it maybe originated from Africa.
Perfect, Isabel. Thank you so much. I better let you get back to the conference. You didn't come all the way to Australia, to Adelaide, just to talk to me. So thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Eve.
I certainly enjoyed every bit of my conversation with Isabel, and I took some lessons from her description of what an ideal funder should be. You've been listening to Funding with Trust, and I hope you learned something from today's episode. Tune in for our next episode, and don't forget to send me your feedback by emailing hello@fundingwithtrust.org. I'm Eva Mala, and see you next time.